We're going to be learning the Sicha of Shabbos Parshas Toldot. And on that year, it was Mivarchim, the Shabbos that we blessed the month of Kislev, and Erev Chodesh Kislev. In the year Tafshin Yudalid, the end of 1953, going into 1954. There's a little star on the top. It says that this Sicha was edited by the Rebbe in Yiddish, printed in Likutei Sichos, Chelik Aleph. And they say that in this publication that we're going to learn now, there's going to be some additions that were not from the edited version. Okay. So the Rebbe...
I'm trying to get in on my computer now with something, some kind of process. Take 1 minute here to get into it.
So Shimon was on here before. I'm just wondering if you couldn't get into the Zoom.
No, it's not that. It's something with my computer. It's just taking a minute here.
Right. I'll read and you'll catch up.
Okay, I'm getting in now. Here we go.
Okay, so it's page 162. And
got it.
It's the Rebbe starts like this. Sivu Nagin v'Omer Maimer. The Rebbe said to instructed that they sing the Maimer Nigun, and they said the Maimer of L'havin Inyan Erev Rosh Chodesh to understand the concept of Erev Rosh Chodesh and Rosh Chodesh. L'achar Maimer, after the Rebbe said the Maimer Sivu Nagin Hanigin Pod B'Shalom, the Rebbe said to sing the song Pod B'Shalom, the song that's attributed to the month of Kislev, Yud and Tes Kislev and Yud Tes Kislev. Because of the Shabbos that we bless the month of Kislev, it's appropriate to sing the song Pod B'Shalom. Okay, Sif Beis, the Rebbe says, Amr Chazal, our rabbis teach us, Shela Asid Lave, that when Mashiach comes, the Hebrew Yemenu, Yemru Dafka, that when the Jewish people, the Bnei Yisrael, are going to say, the Yitzchak, our father Yitzchak, Haid Hashem, we're just starting, page 162, Sif Beis. So this is a Sicha that's also edited in the Likutei Sichos Chelik Aleph. So it says, Amr Chazal, the rabbis have taught us, Shela Asid Lave, Yomru Davka Yitzchak. We're going to tell him when Mashiach comes, we're going to say to our father Yitzchak, specifically to him, Ki ata avinu, Yitzchak, you're our father. It's a famous Gemara in Shabbos. And V'tama Davar, Mvor B'chsidis, why are we going to say to Yitzchak that you're our father versus say Avram or Yaakov? Lefisha inyone shal Yitzchak hu pachad debitul. What was Yitzchak's avoda? Yitzchak's avoda was the avoda of pachad, of fear, awe, and fear, really, ubitul, and to be self-nullification. He was a person who had a lot of bitul. Shezeu echad hachidushim shalazman delasad lavei kanal b'maimer. The Rebbe said that's a chidush. That's going to be in the time of Mashiach, like the Rebbe spoke about evidently in the Maimer that he said before this Sicha. The idea that Mashiach is going to be a connection to pachad and bitul. I didn't learn the Maimer, so I don't know exactly the connection. I'm not going to assume, but maybe he'll explain a bit in the Sicha. Says V'yeshleimar, we could say, Shlachem Matzinu Gabi Yitzchak, we find by Yitzchak, our forefather, should become in Yonim in certain things. Yitzchak himself lived a life of like the time of Mashiach. We know that in general it says about the fathers, all the fathers, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, all of them had a taste of the world to come. By the father, it was only that they were able to, the rest of the fathers was something that they were able to tap into the tiny, the pleasure, that there's a pleasure of life, so to say, of spiritual life, of spiritual being in the world to come, that they were able to have that taste of that pleasure. Is he Timon? They had a little taste. Yitzchak lives the life of a person who's in a Mashiach life. A person who's living the life of Lasud Lavei. Kivan, Shebe'ez HaKeda Parchen Ishmasei. When Yitzchak was put on the Akeda, it says his soul flew out of his body. And he got back, so to say, a part of his soul was connected from the world to come. So he was, when his soul left him, and he came back as a different person. It wasn't the same Yitzchak that went on the altar as the Yitzchak that went off the altar. When he went off the altar, the Rebbe says he had a neshama from the world to come. seems to be from a Zohar. Ava be'emes, the Rebbe says, it's not just that his soul left him and he came back of a soul of Lasid Lavi. I mean, obviously, it doesn't mean that it was a different character, but within the character of Yitzchak's soul came back the element that was connected to the world of Lasid Lavi, of Olam Haba. The Rebbe says, nevertheless, even though that's something unique that Yitzchak's soul left his body and came back, but that he's not the only person. For instance, he says, Yesh Deis, Sheitzel ben Shunamis. There's opinions that by the son of the Shunamis, the story we read about, I believe, it was not Chaysar, I think it was Parshas Vayera, was the Haftorah of the one that Elisha put him back to life. The Eitzel Oid Kama Parachan Shmasim. There's others who their soul left. So what's my lasa Yitzchaki? What is the uniqueness of Yitzchak? Shehi lamaila mi oilam umisham lakach v'himshech ba'oilam l'kedlakaman. That from Yitzchak, it's not just that he passed away and he came back alive. That there was something that beyond the world that came back with him when he came back. It wasn't just that he left and he came back, but what came back? Like will be explained. It says like this: Al pasuk when the verse says "Vayigdu al Arim," that the boys grew up, meaning Yaakov and Esav. It says Shebeshar shenasu b'nei Yud Gimel Shana. I think we've learned to Sicho before that when they became 13, meaning Yitzchak and Yaakov and Esav turned 13, they were twins. Zeh pirush labatim midrashes. This one went to the yeshiva, meaning Yaakov. Zeh pirush l'avodah zarah, and the other one went to the house of idol worship. Page Judith, on page 162 at the bottom, last paragraph. So Yaakov halach l'batim midrashes. Yaakov went to the yeshiva. Esav l'avodah zarah. Esav went to the avodah zarah. And when does it say? It says it in the Rashi says on the pasuk, and it's when they turned 13. So the obvious question, it brings down the Das Zkein and Bali Taisvis, right? The descendants of Rashi asked the obvious question. The math doesn't go together. If they went off if they split their ways at 13 years old, that Yaakov went to the yeshiva and Esav went to the house of avodah zarah. So we're going to see we're missing 2 years in the calculation. Why? Because Amr Chazal, the rabbis taught us, Avram should have lived exactly like Yitzchak, 180 years. He lost 5 years of his life as a gift, so to say. God wanted to spare him the anguish of seeing Esav become Esav. So God said, you know what? They were born when based on the math, they would have turned 15 when Avram passed away, and therefore, right, because Yitzchak was 60 when they were born, and Avram was I forget the whole math. I think Avram was 3 years. So the whole cheshbon, basically, we'll see in a second, was that he lost 5 years of his life, so you shouldn't see Esav's going off the derech, off the way. Seemingly, the question is, if you're saying that he was 13 years old when he went to the house of idol, Adain Chai Avram was still alive. Why? When Yitzchak was born, this is the math. When Yitzchak was born, and when Avram was 100, right? He was 99. He had the bris, and he was told that a year later is Nav Yitzchak, so he was 100. Yitzchak ben Shishim Shana B'led. They say something. Yitzchak was 60 when they were born, which would make Avram 160. So if he passed away at 175, and Esav went off the derech at 13, which means that Avram Avinu would have been 173. So he was missing 2 years of his life. He saw Esav going to avodah zarah. Well, Pirush avodah zarah. Avram ben Meya Shivim v'shalosh. He would have been 173. The period of 2 years. You would see Esav going off to the derech. That's the Bali Taisvis ask a question on the math of how could you say that Yaakov and Yitzchak went off the derech at 13. But that's Zkein and Bali Taisvis. So the answer, the Zkein and Bali Taisvis. Shebeis Shana Manal, these 2 years that seemingly don't add up to the life of Avram and Yitzchak. She'Avram Adayin Chai. Shebeis Shana Manal. that he sinned in a hiding way. Means he went to Avodah Zarah, but he wasn't telling anyone about it. He was keeping his clothes on. He looked like a frum boy, and he went to sneak off to the house of Avodah Zarah. So Avram didn't see it. It wasn't in front of. It wasn't in his face. Alatir Zeni Masvik. The Rebbe doesn't say that. The Rebbe says doesn't want to accept that answer. If you want to say that Esav could have been a mensch and behaved himself at least to pretend to be a good boy in front of his grandfather Avram for 2 years, so why would Avram have to lose another 5 years of his life? He could have controlled himself and acted 7 years in like a mensch. He could have hid for another 5 years, so he would have waited until Avram passed away. Why does Avram have to lose 5 years of his life? Because Esav needs to show the whole world that he serves idols. Why do we have to take 5 years of Avram's life? So to say that Esav was cautious and considerate to his grandfather Avram for 2 years, he could have been cautious and considerate for his grandfather for 7 years. So Basar Maris V'gam Hashem Riva in other Sfarim, the book Asar Maris, and the name of the Riva, Yesh Tir Tznaisiv, there's an additional answer. Shahashanim sheyitzchak kimdim v'akeda at Rivka tia baskim l'shanim v'yem echad. That there was years Shahashanim sheyitzchak kimtin, that the 2 years that Yitzchak waited from the Akeda until Rivka turned 3 in 1 day. He didn't just come back to the world and it's interesting. I don't remember clearly, but I don't remember it saying anywhere that Yitzchak was by his mother's burial. It says Avram eulogized her and all that. It doesn't say anything about Yitzchak. It says the Riva says that right after the Akeda, until Rivka was ready for marriage, Yitzchak went to the Garden of Eden. And therefore those years didn't count as part of his life. So he turned 60. When it says that he had the children at 60, in theory he was 63. He just didn't, because they didn't count those 3 years that he was hiding in Gan Eden. Why didn't those years count? Because his existence was in a place beyond the world. So even though in this world, so to say, Avram was living, and so Avram turned 175, Yitzchak turned 60, even though he should have been 63.
Now, when it refers to Gan Eden, is it referring to the physical place, or maybe in Ethiopia, or is it referring to his spiritual space? And where is that source from?
The source of this is, he says it's brought down in the Sarma Maris and the Riva. Riva is the Rishon. He gives, if you look at footnote number 19, Riva gives credit to what he's saying. He says that we also find that in the time of the Mabel, also time didn't matter. Okay, that he's just giving credit to the idea that time doesn't count. But the Riva, I think the Riva was also one of the Bali Tosfos himself. But he definitely was a Rishon. Says that he was in Gan Eden. It's a good question if he was in Gan Eden Tachton or Gan Eden Elyon. I don't know. But it had to be, I would assume it has to be Gan Eden Elyon, because the Rebbe is going to bring soon a proof. I don't know if it's in this Sicho or another Sicho, but how did Yitzchak know that, Rashi says that when Yaakov walked in to get the blessings, that Yitzchak says, I smell the smell of Gan Eden. So the question is, I mean, it's very nice, but how was he familiar with the smell of Gan Eden? Because he was there. But and again, this is Rashi says this in Pshutish Mikra, and the simple explanation, because he says it doesn't make sense. The clothing that Yaakov was wearing, especially the skins, have a bad odor. So why would Yitzchak say he smells like Garden of Eden? So the Riva says that I guess I would have to assume it's Gan Eden Elyon. I'll tell you why, because in Gan Eden Tachton, I don't know if it's beyond time. In Gan Eden Tachton, Gan Eden Tachton is a place that Adam was in this world, and Adam lived in time. It says that time was created and he was there for 7 days. So we would have to assume it's Gan Eden Elyon, the upper Gan Eden, and he was there in a physical body, like Elijah the prophet. I mean, it's not the only person that's been there. So let's see what he says. And these years don't count. So therefore, the calculation of Yitzchak being 60 when the boys were born means that when they were 13, Avram Avinu had already passed away, because Avram's time was continuing. He says, that Gan Eden is higher than the Zman of the world. So when Yaakov was born, Esav and his brother, it was more than 62 years. I'm not sure why the problem is like based on this, it would be 63 years. Rivka was born right after that Kedah. His years, because we don't count the years that he was in Gan Eden. For Avram, he was 62. I'm just trying to think, why is it 2? It says that Rivka was Bas Gimel Shanim v'Yemachad. She had to be 3 and 1 day. Maybe she was 1 year old when the Kedah happened. I think there's other sichos where the Rebbe goes into the details. She must have been 1 by the Kedah, not born, because if she was just born by the Kedah, then she would then it would be 3 years in Gan Eden. So he says, Yesh l'palmim. The Rebbe says sometimes Inyan Shalali Lamal Mazman, Av Kshachayzer Machrach Mazman Nikra Davar. The Rebbe says there's sometimes where a person could experience out of time experience, but when you come back, Av Kshachayzer, when you come back out of that out of time experience, the Hazman Nikra Davar, you could see it. He gives an example. Kumei Sipur, this is a famous story. The Baal Shem Tov, Kosev L'Gisei Reb Gershon. There's a famous letter that the Baal Shem Tov later, his brother-in-law, who at first didn't hold of the Baal Shem Tov, he didn't know about him. When the Baal Shem Tov revealed himself, he became one of his biggest students, and later went to Eretz Yisrael to learn in the Yeshiva Orach Chaim. So the Baal Shem Tov writes a letter to his brother-in-law, Reb Gershon. I think this is still when he's living in Ukraine, that in Kitov. It says, the Baal Shem Tov wrote, or maybe not, maybe it's the letter of Mashiach. He wrote about something that happened at a later time. It means he wrote it as if it's happening. He said this and this is happening, but it didn't happen. It's something that happened later. Hashem Tov was in a space of Yitzira, in a place of in the world of Yitzira. Then in the world of Yitzira, it's not the time doesn't run the way we'd run time. Last year, I was asked to give a class around this time of year in Hebrew University. And we spoke about this, and the people were a little thrown off. They were Gentiles sitting at the class there in Hebrew University, and they were having a hard time with this. But in the world of Yitzira, time works differently. And in the world of Yitzira, the time is in units of 10 to 15 years. So in what takes 10, 15 years in our world, in the world of Asiya, in the world of Yitzira, happens in one frame. And in that one frame, the Baal Shem Tov saw things that happened later in Rebbe Gershon's life. So he wrote about it as if it's happened because he was in the world of Yitzira. But it wasn't like the Baal Shem Tov came back and he was younger or something. And also by the Baal Shem Tov, his soul went up to the world of Yitzira, but his body was here. By Yitzchak, his whole body went to the world of Gan Eden. It says on 164. And therefore, this idea that Yitzchak was in the Garden of Eden, it wasn't just an experience that he had once, but also it happened that even when he came back, when he was in this world, that Yitzchak says that when Yaakov comes in to get the blessing, he says that you smell, like I said before, that at the end of today's reading. On Thursday's reading, he says that I smell the smell of the field that was blessed by God. What is the field that's blessed by God? Gan Eden. The Rebbe asked the question, the Klotz Kasha. How would Yitzchak be familiar with the smell of Gan Eden? I mean, it could be a very nice smell, but maybe it's something else. How was he able to identify the location of the smell? Because he was there. And so he remembers the smell of Gan Eden, right? You're familiar with the smell if you've been there. Even though that a person, we know that even when everyone's soul starts off in Gan Eden, and when the soul comes down, the Malach gives it a flick on the nose to forget its experience before that. And the reason why the Malach makes us forget of our experience above, because we wouldn't function properly in this world. if we lived with the memory of our soul back in, because the memory component of a person is not the body, it's the soul. So if the soul has memories of his experience in Gan Eden, how are we supposed to be effective? How are we supposed to be frightened, so to say, and deal with the challenges of this world when the world is not going to be real to us? So therefore, the Malach puts us into this illusion of the reality of this world. So we should forget about the world to come, by Gan Eden. It shouldn't confuse us. Life in of how we have to live this life. And we find it the opposite also, that it also goes through an experience of forgetting this world. And the higher it goes, the higher it elevates, the more it gets disconnected to this world. They say that. I mean, I'm not experienced, I don't remember clearly, but I heard from, I think, Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz, that as the neshama goes higher and higher throughout, after the years of the yard site of a person, it gets more and more far in the relationship with its descendants. So Lishak Chizid Hayomad forgets about this world. Yitzchak was unique. He lives Gan Eden here. It wasn't confusing for him. It wasn't a bilbul for Yitzchak to have Gan Eden and be in this world. Everyone else that would confuse us, would disrupt our avodah. Doesn't disrupt Yitzchak's avodah. He has that kind of focus. Even based on this, we'll understand that what is it's brought down Chassidus in the Maimer. Maybe we're going to learn this Maimer on Sunday night. Why was it that Yitzchak wanted to bless Esav? Kivon. He saw him from a higher place. He saw him from where Yitzchak was standing. From the encompassing location. So if Yitzchak was able to see where Esav was standing on a higher level, why couldn't he see the way he was as a pnimi, as a person internally? That it's very nice that he had potential, and his surrounding energy was very strong. But how he brought things down in a pnimius, he was Esav. Sheboy poil hamakiv. He was beyond time. He saw Esav also from the perspective of the time of Mashiach. And after Esav gets fixed. He doesn't see the way Esav and Yaakov are fighting, or Esav wants to kill Yaakov. He sees the way that you're going to work, you're going to serve your younger brother. It means you're going to serve Yaakov in the proper way, not because you're going to regret it. Now you're going to grudge it. You're going to see it the way the Mashiach comes. Esav is going to be judged, and he's going to admit. The Gemara goes into all the details. Like the Aldim Rashab says, that Yitzchak saw it all from the perspective of Mashiach. So because he was in a level of Gan Eden and he was in a level of La'asad Lavai, he saw it from there. So he wanted maybe to help that along. Apiza Yuvin, and the basis will understand, when Yitzchak does bench Esav, that seemingly in the discussion that Esav has with Yitzchak, he says, your brother came and took your blessing. What can I do for you? I can't help you. He still blesses him to have the fat of the land. He blesses him with Rome, like Rashi says. Even though he already gave it to Yaakov. So in Zui Talia Shayavim, he was given Calabria. He was given it the Italy of Yavin was given to, everything was given to Yaakov. So what does it mean he gave it to Esav? So he says, because at that time, he gave everything to Yaakov that existed at the time. But the time when he gave when Yitzchak blessed Esav, there wasn't a Talia Shel Yavin. K'mayim Rizal, because when did Italy become Italy? I'm not talking about the physical space, but Italy as a makom of place. The Gemara says that when Shlomo Melech married the daughter of Parei, the Gemara teaches us Yard Gavriel v'notz kana b'yam v'ala by Siriata and v'ala Nivna, that the place of Italy was created from Shlomo Melech marrying Bas Parei. It's like Nasli Yitzchak Yaakov, so therefore it was never given to Yitzchak. Yitzchak never gave it to Yaakov because he only gave to Yaakov what was presently. Therefore he was able to give to Esav. What we're seeing here is that Yitzchak lived in and out of time. So in time he gave Yitzchak what was there. And what he gave to Esav was what wasn't there yet. And why was it there? Why was it ever going to come into being? Is because Yaakov the descendants of Yaakov did something that Hashem didn't like. That Shlomo married Bas Pari. And when Shlomo married Bas Pari, Gabriel created a new entity. And that's Rome. The L'chur Kasha, seemingly it doesn't make sense. So he says, seemingly, even if you want to say that he gave it to him and it was going to come later, how could you give him something that's going to come later if the law is you can't be makna something, you can't give something to someone that's not there yet? So again, we see that Yitzchak's out of time, that even the Yitzchak, the present and the future is all one. So therefore, even though in the present now it's not here, but in Yitzchak's present it is there, and therefore he's able to bless Esav with the Tali Shel Yavin. The Rebbe says, Kvoi Kedush is 165. Kvoi Kedush Admer Shlita Amr Bas Chayk, the Rebbe said in a joking way. He says, the Rebbe is Fabringing. The Rebbe says, so when a person wants to be yoitza, get by, so to say, without having to wash for shalosh shudas, but to do it through Torah, that's a way to do it. He quotes that a person could be mekayim the mitzvah of suda shlishis with learning Torah. Is hinik asher oimrim an egna Torah? If you're going to say your own idea, someone could come on Saturday night, Matzah Shabbos, and say, check into your details and say what you said wasn't accurate. Therefore, in what happens, and retroactively, then you never had a Suda Shlishis because your Torah wasn't a true idea. Gezinter says it's healthier. Better have a piece of herring. This worst case scenario, if you say something that's not accurate, at least you had some Suda. To say something accurate that don't come up with your own ideas, so someone won't come to Matzah Shabbos and tell you that what you said wasn't considered a Suda Shlishis. The Rebbe said, so too in this situation, so same thing in our case. He goes, how could Yitzchak had given something to Esav and enter into the question if he's allowed to give something to someone that doesn't exist yet, right? There's a machlekes. There's a machlekes if you could give something to someone, gift something to someone that doesn't exist yet. So that's, some people say you can, some people say you can't. So why would Yitzchak give something to Esav in Mizbar Adin? What happens if afterwards is it going to turn out that the halacha is that you ain't adam makna davar shlei b'olam? You can't, according to the opinion that you can't. So what happens? Yishur Esav lei bracha. Esav won't have a bracha. Why would he give Esav something that's questionable? It's not everyone agrees you could give something to Esav that doesn't exist yet. However, he says, but based on what I said, makes sense. Because like I said, Yitzchak was higher than time. For Yitzchak, it was ready here. So as far as Yitzchak was in the space of beyond time, and therefore he's able to gift something that would only come into existence in the time of Shlomo Melech. Okay. So this is an idea that the Rebbe is saying, basically, that Yitzchak was a person that lived in Gan Eden. And that's why everything about Yitzchak it doesn't contradict the time. We have to assume that Rivka was 1 year old. Therefore, the 2 years don't count. So even though they were 13 at the age of Avram's death, Avram himself was 175. It doesn't contradict the years. Okay, the Rebbe wants to teach us something in Avodas Hashem. What does this all mean in our service of Hashem? What the Chazal teach us, that we only have 3 fathers. So these are connected to each person. There's a difference between the fathers and the tribes. The way the tribes, their level, it's not responsible. It's not a responsibility of every person to say, I have to try to be Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda. If you belong to Reuven, your vote is Reuven. If you belong to Yisachar, your vote is Yisachar. Now, a person doesn't have to try to figure all the avodas of the Shvatim in their avodas Hashem. But not so by the fathers. When it comes to the fathers, you can't say I want to be like Avram. You're connected to all 3 of the fathers. And therefore, every time we daven, everyone says, because we're connected to Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. Each one of us. Each one of the fathers gives us an energy how we're supposed to do our avodas Hashem. Mizeh move on. Sheinin zeh shediber beYitzchak shediver beYitzchak that we just spoke about Yitzchak. Shlakach v'himshach min Gan Eden ba'olam. Yitzchak lived the reality of Gan Eden in this world. It wasn't a contradiction. He was able to bring in. It was part of his life. The living of a life of a person that's been in Gan Eden. He brought it into his space in this world. It's something that we have to try to figure out how we could do that, emulate that. We find this by Shabbos. That Shabbos blesses all the days of the week. All the days of the week. That Shabbos also is higher than time. Like the Rebbe spoke about in the Maimer that we did not learn. And how we take the energy of Shabbos, which is beyond time, is to bring it into the time of the week. That's why we mention Shabbos every day in the Yom Yom Rishon Shabbos, Yom Sheni B'Shabbos. That's part of the, when a person says the Yom Yom and you mention Shabbos, today's Sunday, the first day after Shabbos, the second day after Shabbos, we're integrating in our memory, in our consciousness, Shabbos every day. Like the Gemara teaches us about Shammai, the famous Shammai, the colleague of Hillel. Everything he experienced in the week, everything he came across in the week, he was always trying to see how could he apply this to Shabbos. Oh, it's good food. We'll put it away for Shabbos. I always say the story that I once was walking Erev Mamish, Erev Shabbos, and running home and I had, by mistake, I don't know why, I bought an extra piece of fish, of salmon. The fishman sold me an extra piece of fish and I took it. So I was running home and this guy says, "Could you have anything for Shabbos?" So I didn't have any cash on me. So I said, "Let me give you a piece of fish, if you wouldn't mind taking a piece of fish." So he took it and he says, I just want to tell you that if it's okay with you, I have fish at home. I have a filter fish. And for me, it's better to put it in the freezer and I'll use it as a supper for one night because, I don't have maybe every night supper. So I said, of course, not a problem. But it's the idea of connecting your food to Shabbos. It says, what does this all mean? How do we bring Shabbos? How do we bring beyond time into time? Yehudi. The Rebbe says like this: when it's required and when it's being asked from a Jew, she's nazer abzagen sich, separate yourself. Mitayves v'tanugai oilam hazeh, from the pleasures of this world. V'chol inyani yeh achas shralti. And what do we say from a person? What should be your focus? Your focus should be achas shralti, that I have one quest from Hashem. Lachsis b'nayim Hashem, to rest within the noyam, in the light, in the presence, in the awe of God. Tainhu, he says, the person says back, how could you ask me to say achas shralti, like David HaMelech says, I have only one thing I ask for Hashem, when you put me in a body in this world with an animal soul that has wants, other wants, it's not achas shralti. How do you want me to cut off from the pleasures of this world and have achas shralti to Hashem? She's asking me to my only desire is to be noyim havaya, which is like to live a life of Gan Eden, of olam haba, Gan Eden kiyetzibai. When Mashiach comes, we'll have it, but I don't have it now. Right now, I'm struggling with my nefesh bahamis. What nefesh bahamis has other ones. So the answer to this is you're a descendant of Yitzchak also. Gan Eden, that person could tap into the energy of Yitzchak, to contemplate, to get deep in the idea of what does it mean about L'asad Lavei and the Mashiach comes in the Garden of Eden. So much so you could get into the mindset of it through contemplation. Even now, while you live here, that you could be that when you smell something, it's reach. This is the smell of Gan Eden. All the pleasures of the world, even things that are truly pleasurable. You recognize that these are only the psilis, the leftovers, the offshoots, the discharges from what the pleasures is of Gan Eden. Why would you think about giving away the essence, the real pleasure, the pleasure of Gan Eden, for something that's a discharge, something that's a leftover, that's a psilis? And if you're going to get rid of the main thing, then nothing's going to be there. right? It says what the psilus has to come from something. The psilus, the discharge, comes from the main thing. But if you're not interested in the main thing, there's no psilus even. As focus yourself. All his thoughts, or her thoughts. And what's the main thing? And how does one get that? Like we said before, what's avodah of Yitzchak is bittul. Bittul is not about me. And and how is a person able to have that focus of achas shoralities through bittul? In Yoni Bavoidu, what does it mean? What does the bittul mean in our actual? What does it mean to be mevatel yourself? Accept the yoke. This is what Hashem wants from me. How does the queen come? How does the young woman come to the king? It's talking about Esther, but it's talking about the soul. Is with the bittul. And when you have bittul, you can come before the king. Bittul v'kabal soul. Yitzchak had that. That wasn't just that Yitzchak lived Gan Eden. In order for a person to be that consciousness, the consciousness of Gan Eden of Olam Haba, is a person who has the bittul and the pachad and the kabbalah soul. This is also the reason why by marriage, we don't, in our custom, obviously by Jews, the woman doesn't say anything. She's quiet. The man says, "Hariyat mukadeshesli." We know that if a person says something to someone else and you're quiet, so halachically, by being silent and not protesting, it means you agree. So if she says that if he says to her, I'm marrying you, and she doesn't say, no, I'm not interested in marrying you, means that she agrees to be married also to him. So it's, her silence is a response. But nevertheless, why don't we, it's nice that shtika is kohaidah, but better would be that she would say yes, or I accept your proposal for marriage. But nevertheless, the minig by Jewish people is, which is Torah, shakala shesekes, that the woman doesn't say anything. The reason is, how could two entities really connect one to the next? That through that union should be implemented the infinite light to bless generations of blessed generations. When there's a bittul, the connection when two people, when if she would respond, so as much as the response would be a response of acceptance, but it'd be lacking the bittul, and for a real connection to go through properly, there has to be the bittul with the silence, shtika, full ständige bittul. By day bittul nasa yichud pnimi, and then you can have a proper union. That the woman goes over the man, she's higher than the man. She crowns the man by the bittul, through the bittul, not avoida. She reaches much higher, and it's a beautiful sicha the Rebbe says about Yitzchak, and we should be zeicha to takem. Wish everyone a good Shabbos, a Kodesh, and safe week. Take care. Laila Tov.